met a very nice lady who graduated from the School of Foreign Service with a Bachelor's of Science in International Relations at Georgetown University. And she received her graduate degree, Master of Fine Arts, at the University of Maryland. Ms. Carol Harrison has an extensive one-person exhibit of her portraits of artists in the gallery at Crowell & Loring, which is a prestigious law firm. It's located near the Capitol. She loves photography. That's her calling. She creates books to project her vision of portraits in a compelling and profound way, and continues to photograph what is important to her, the individual she cares about and with whom she has a connection. At one point she tagged along with Professor Jan Karski. She also studied history of Poland, and she was very impressed with Karski. Karski was a friend of Professor George, late Professor George Jajko. Jan Karski was also a friend of Iwo Pogonowski and Professor Jerzy Lerski, all of whom were my mentors in one way or another. Jan Karski was a courier of the Polish underground. He started very early, crisscrossed Nazi-occupied Europe, and carried out orders, documents, files to the Polish government in exile. Jan Karski was a patriot. He was never recognized after the war. In the 1970s, late 70s, Eli Wiesel discovered that it was Jan Karski who brought the first report of mass murder of the Jewish people to the West. And Wiesel was really the only person who cared about it. The Jewish community recognized Karski, and at the end of his life, in the 80s and 1990s, Jan Karski basically talked about his role in exposing or trying to alarm the world about the Holocaust. He was much more than that, but this is at the popular level. If anybody knows anything about Jan Karski, one knows about his role in shedding light or attempting to alarm the world about the Holocaust. I'll just tell you one anecdote. Jan Karski was brought by Ambassador Kant Ciechanowski, who was Poland's ambassador here in Washington, D.C., to the White House. And President Roosevelt arranged a meeting with America's leading Jewish activist, intellectual, professor of law, and Supreme Court Justice, Felix Frankfurter. And Jan Karski said, you know, I saw with my very own eyes how the Germans would round out Jews. Nobody said Nazis at that time. The Germans would round out Jews, and they put them on the train. They took them to a facility. I visited the facility. I didn't see exactly how it went on, but they were all killed. About 10,000 people. And Justice Frankfurter, saying President Roosevelt, looked at Karski with astounded bewilderment and said, young man, I don't believe you. Are you telling me there's a factory that actually kills people? He said, yes. And Felix Frankfurter repeated, I can't believe it. I just don't believe you. To which the Polish ambassador said, listen, Felix, they used to play tennis together. This young man has full backing of the Polish government in exile. This is not a joke. And Felix Frankfurter could not process. Why? Because unless you take mass murder prevention with me, a normal human being who lives in paradise called the United States of America does not believe that evil exists. And that is why it's so hard to explain anything to anybody. Not only about the Holocaust, but the Polish operation or any of the atrocities that I deal with. Jan Karski was shattered by his inability to break through the wall of refusal to acknowledge the horrible. On the other hand, it's quite normal. Human beings would like to feel comfortable with themselves. Sometimes I get yelled at home. No Holocaust at the dinner table. Again, mass murder in Africa. When my commanding officer tries to cheer me up, she says, "Oh, why don't you tell me an Auschwitz story?" Then I perk up. It is horrible, but I understand this. I understand normal people can't, including such prominent men as President Roosevelt and Justice Frankfurter. Jan Karski tried to make a difference, and I would like to introduce someone who will show us his intimate side from the artistic point of view. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm going to tell you an uplifting and positive personal story of Jan Karski. So I appreciate the introduction because that's the side that most people know. And I knew Dr. Karski, in fact, I'll advance this one slide, at Georgetown University for 30 years. I first met him when my mother started working in the School of Foreign Service. And Dr. Karski, I would go to the school after high school to do my homework until my mother and I drove home. And Dr. Karski was in and out of the office quite a bit, but he was formidable. I mean, he was a diplomat, he was regal, he had a projecting Polish accent, and that was very intimidating to a 16-year-old. So I didn't really talk to him. In fact, I didn't start talking really until I became a photographer. But my mother and he were very close. They were colleagues. They were trying to save the School of Foreign Service because it was going under. There were a series of deans, interim deans, and nothing really was being done. Until Dean Crow entered the school, and Dr. Karski and he and my mother worked together to save the school, make it what it is today. So I was then asked, I went on to get a master's in photography, and you can see from the previous talks why one would leave foreign service and go into fine art photography. So I was asked by the school, a commission, to photograph Dr. Karski, and I thought, oh great, I'm going to photograph Dr. Karski, I'll meet him in Copley Hall, and we'll have a conversation. He grabbed my arm and said, "You must stop Peter." Well, I didn't know how on earth I was going to stop Peter, the Dean of the School of Foreign Service, from speaking in front of 200 people. But the intent of Dr. Karski was so strong that I actually thought about crawling under the table and pulling the plug. Because I thought that, well, finally, I thought, well, that's why Dean Crow wanted me to be there, because I was Mrs. Harrison's daughter and sort of like a security blanket. So then after that, there was a book written, Karski, How One Man Tried to Stop the Holocaust. And they had it available there, and the author was there, and so I picked up a copy, and I thought, well, I should read this, but I had 3 little children, and I thought, you don't have time to read a book with 3 little children. And then one day, I had some time, I thought, well, I'll just pick this up. Well, I picked it up, and I couldn't put it down. I was giving the children Cheerios. You know, just eat your Cheerios, I've got to finish, because he was escaping, he was jumping off a train, he was being shot at. It was terrifying, and I was crying reading it and laughing, and because he also had this wonderful twinkle in his eye. And so I put it down, and I called the university, and I said, I have to see Dr. Karski, because he had retired, and I said, please give me his telephone number, I've got to see him today. And so they said, well, we absolutely can't do that, we can't give out personal telephone numbers. So I said, well, let me give you mine, and then if you or someone would call Dr. Karski, then if he decides he wants to see me, then he can call me. So that was the last I heard of it. And then I'm with my children, the phone rings, it's Dr. Karski, within the hour. And he said, you must come and see me, you come today. And I said, I'm on my way, children, be good. But I didn't take a camera because I thought, I'm going to respect his wishes. I'm not going to take a camera. And that's really tough for a photographer not to take a camera. So I went over, and his apartment was filled with memorabilia, chess sets, medals, medallions, just everywhere. And so we were talking about it, and he was comfortable responding to questions about which countries had given him what. And he said it was very interesting to read the biography about him, because the materials were classified, and they had just been released in Warsaw, London, the United States, and Wood had traveled all these places to do original research. So I read the book, then I decided my children need a history to learn about Dr. Karski and what heroism really is. And it's true that Americans really don't know a whole lot about tragedy in the sense of our history compared to the history of Poland, which I just knew nothing about. I was told that by the publisher of the Beta book. And then I thought, you know, you're right. I live between Canada and Mexico, not Germany and the Soviet Union. So I took Olivia over, my daughter, and I later read that Dr. Karski was particularly fond of children, and I could see that because he was absolutely focused on Olivia, having a conversation. And I thought, well, maybe this time I did take 2 cameras. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just ask him if I could take a picture of Olivia and him, and I'll back way off if he says no. Oh, yes, Olivia, come over and sit next to me. Take a picture of the 2 of them. And then I thought, well, I'm a fine art photographer. This photograph, I just happened to see Dr. Karski as I was walking across the campus. And that one was for me, so he's relaxed and happy. So after I took those photographs, then I thought, well, Dr. Karski, this is when he didn't want to be photographed, which you can tell the difference. And I said, Dr. Karski, may I just take some of you, just by yourself, too? Well, yes. And so he said, but I must put on a proper shirt and tie. So he excused himself and came back ready to be photographed. And it was all the difference of if it was a commission for the university or if it was for Margaret Harrison's daughter. So Libby and I would go by and visit Dr. Karski, and we would drop off fruit, and there would often be people from the embassy there taking care of him. And then he became ill, and then he passed away, which is very sad. And I went to his the memorial service at the St. Matthew's, sat with Dean Crow and his son, and went back to the Polish embassy. And Dean Crow gave the most eloquent eulogy that I have ever heard. I mean, it just, I think everyone in the room was practically in tears. Well, then I went, I apparently have some of the few photographs of Dr. Karski in this 40-year span at Georgetown. So 2014 was proclaimed the year of Jan Karski in Poland, and people started contacting me. Beta Publishing was one in Warsaw, and the National Museum of History in Warsaw. And I've made very good friends with them, which has been a wonderful sort of ongoing goodness that Dr. Karski generated. And in fact, if Olivia will undo this, I'll pass this around. The Polish government made a coin after one of my photographs, and I just got this. Thank you. Let's see it. So it was the Beta publisher who suggested that I start reading about Poland, and I started reading, and I haven't stopped because it's a fascinating country, it's a great country, and now I understand more about Dr. Karski, having read the history of Poland, because he retained his Polish accent throughout his life. In fact, he spoke English with a Polish accent more strongly than the Beta publisher, and I think that was to keep his Polish identity, because he was so proud of being Polish, and he was proud of being American. So, in closing, I would just say, God bless Dr. Karski. He was a fine man, and it was an honor to know him.
Dr. Karski was a gentleman. He was very charming. One of my friends one time came to complain to me. She says, you know, Professor Karski, she was an undergraduate at Georgetown. When I came to his office to talk about my midterm, said, oh, you're such a beautiful maiden. Polish knights used to ride into Germany to carry young ladies like you off to marry. It stayed with her when she was a graduate student at Columbia. She still came to me to explain. I said, you know, he was a feudal lord. It's a different civilization. She said, I didn't feel threatened at all, but shouldn't I? I don't know. This is Professor Karski. He really meant to say that, never mind that you're a German, you know, you're welcome in my office, you know.
He was very old world, and
Yes.
an elegant gentleman,
Yes.
and this is the coin.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. You see, even beautiful things belong here, not only morbid. There is a question, I think there's, would you take a question?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes. Do you have any photos with him and his wife?
No, I don't. I didn't mean that.
There was also his brother here too. His brother was in the underground as well. His brother was on the police force. He was an officer, a commissioned officer of Polish police. So he stayed as a commissioned officer during the Nazi occupation and did some splendid work. But the real name of Professor Karski was Kosciuszko, and his family is still in Poland. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.